She wasn't supposed to be on that flight, let alone in the cockpit. But when the captain collapsed midair and the left engine failed at 35,000 feet, one quiet passenger stood up and saved 189 lives. This is the true story of Wren Taylor, a former Army helicopter pilot no one believed, until the moment everything went wrong. Welcome to my channel. I wasn't supposed to be on that plane. Not because I missed a flight or changed itineraries. I just didn't belong there anymore. At least not in the sky. But life has a way of throwing you back into places you've tried your damnedest to leave behind. The boarding call for Flight 928 crackled through the gate speakers at Phoenix Sky Harbor, and I found myself tightening my grip on my carry-on. Row 9, Seat D. Aisle. Close enough to the front to get off fast, but far enough from the cockpit not to draw attention. That was the plan. I'd been out of the service for 5 years. Used to fly medevac choppers out of Kandahar. Falcon 6, they called me back then. My real name's Wren Taylor. 32. Quiet, forgettable. These days I work as a civilian advisor for aviation safety. Translation: I get paid to point out how people screw up maintenance logs, then fly back home pretending I'm not slowly unraveling inside. I stepped onto the 737 like a ghost, nodding at the flight attendants with a practiced half-smile. Nobody noticed me. That's how I liked it. Blending in. Just another business traveler with a laptop and a pocket full of regrets. But I noticed everything. The hum of the APU as we taxied. The subtle vibration from the left side engine. Barely there, but enough to raise the hair on my arms. Old instincts don't die. They go quiet. Until something wakes them up. The cockpit doors stood ajar during boarding. I caught a glimpse of the flight crew, Captain Rory Mathis and First Officer Elena Cruz. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Comfortable. Confident. Too confident. The kind of confidence that comes from flying 1,000 perfect flights, never once having to pull a bird out of a death spiral. I paused near the galley and spoke up, voice low. Pardon me, there's a vibration on the left engine. Might want maintenance to give it a second look. Captain Mathis didn't even turn around. It's been signed off. Appreciate your concern, miss, but we've got it covered. First Officer Cruz gave a polite, dismissive smile. You fly. Used to, I said. Army medevac. Mathis snorted. Well, unless you brought a Black Hawk with you, I'd recommend not touching anything important. This is a real aircraft. I swallowed the sting and nodded. Right. Just a suggestion. I slid into my seat in row 9 and fastened the belt. The passengers around me didn't know who I was, and I didn't care who they were. That was the agreement. I don't ask, they don't ask. Until someone behind me muttered, loud enough to hear, guess someone watched too much Top Gun last night. Chuckles followed. I let it go. The plane roared to life and started down the runway. The vibration was still there, barely, but I felt it. And my gut was already screaming. Something's not right. And I was the only one who could see it coming. We were 27 minutes into the flight when the joke stopped being funny. Cruising at 35,000 feet over central Colorado, the cabin had settled into that strange post-takeoff quiet. The seatbelt sign clicked off, people reached for snacks and laptops, and the businessman across the aisle began scrolling through something loud on his phone without headphones. I ignored it. I was too busy listening to the engines. Or more specifically, the subtle shift in their tone. When you've flown medevac missions through mountains and sandstorms, you learn to hear a jet engine like most people hear a human voice. A change in pitch, a stutter in rhythm, it all means something. This wasn't turbulence. This was a warning. I leaned slightly to glance through the window at the port side wing. My stomach dropped. The left engine was vibrating more now. Not wildly, not yet, but enough. Enough to shake the wing just a little. Enough for the crew to feel it in their bones, if they were paying attention. The businessman from earlier leaned over with a smug grin. You hear something, Top Gun? I didn't answer. Instead, I unbuckled quietly and walked toward the galley again. The flight attendant looked up from sorting snacks. Excuse me, I said, nodding toward the cockpit door. Can you ask the captain to run diagnostics on the left engine? It's showing signs of compressor imbalance. She hesitated. Miss, passengers aren't allowed. I'm not just a passenger, I said, keeping my voice calm. I flew helicopters in combat zones. I know that sound. Please. Just ask. She raised her hands, palms out, backing off. I'll tell them. I returned to my seat. The businessman made a mock salute as I passed. Roger that, Captain. Back in my seat, I closed my eyes, counting down from 10 to keep my pulse steady. 10. 9. 8. And that's when it happened. A shudder ran through the entire aircraft, sudden, violent, like we'd hit a wall of air. Then came the bang, loud and sharp, like a gunshot inside a cave. The lights flickered. People screamed. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling like coiled snakes. The left side of the plane dipped, hard, throwing drinks and luggage across the aisle. Then silence from the cockpit, except for one sound. A voice. First Officer Cruz. Screaming into the radio. Mayday, 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 Flight 928. Engine 1 failure, captain's down. I repeat, the captain is unconscious. I was already unbuckling again. Someone yelled, "What's happening?" A woman was sobbing 3 rows back. Overhead bins had burst open. A child was crying. The air smelled like burning plastic and fear. I stood up and turned to the same flight attendant who had doubted me 2 minutes earlier. "He's down, isn't he?" Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling. He collapsed. "She's alone up there." "Then move," I said. "Now." She hesitated. Training and panic wrestling inside her. "Move or explain to these people's families why you let the only qualified person on board sit on her hands." That did it. She stepped aside. I sprinted to the cockpit, heart pounding, past all the passengers who had rolled their eyes and whispered jokes earlier. Their faces now pale. Pleading. I slammed the cockpit door open and stepped into hell. Captain Mathis was slumped forward, mouth open, unconscious, his body pressing against the yoke. The alarms were blaring. Cruz's hand shook as she tried to manage the aircraft with a co-pilot slumped over her instruments. "I told you something was wrong," I said, pulling the captain back into his seat. "Now scoot." She blinked at me. "You can't be in here. Do you want to save these people or not?" She hesitated. But when I sat down in the left seat, her hands didn't stop me. She knew she needed help. And I was done waiting for permission. I slid into the left-hand seat like I'd never left it. The control yoke felt foreign for all of half a second. Then it clicked, muscle memory taking over where years of rush tried to hold me back. My fingers gripped the controls as I instinctively nudged the yoke to level the aircraft. The plane was in a shallow dive. Not unrecoverable, but with a dead engine and 140,000 pounds of metal and people coasting on one good motor, the margin of error was razor-thin. I glanced over the panel. Warnings lit up like a Christmas tree in hell. Oil pressure on engine 1 had flatlined. Compressor failure, just like I suspected. Some hydraulic instability too, probably due to cascading systems bleed. Get on the horn, I told First Officer Cruz. "Tell ATC we've got a medical emergency, single engine failure, and new command in the cockpit." She hesitated. "But you're not." "Say it, Cruz," I snapped. "We're flying with a qualified former military pilot who just pulled this plane out of a nosedive. If that makes me the air marshal, fine. But I need a heading and I need it now." She keyed the radio, still shaken but finding her footing. "Mayday, mayday. Flight 928. Engine 1 out, captain incapacitated. Attempting control with assistance from experienced pilot, former Army. Request immediate vectors to nearest runway capable of handling 737. Flight 928, came the voice from ATC after a breathless pause. "Copy your emergency. Who's in command?" "This is Wren Taylor," I said, clicking the mic. "Civilian aviation consultant. Former Army medevac pilot. I've got control." There was a silence, then, "Roger that, Miss Taylor. We've got you. Diverting to Colorado Springs Peterson Field, 47 miles east. Emergency cruise en route. Begin descent at 12,000 feet. Vectors inbound." I started dialing in the new course. Cruz stared at me like I'd just walked out of a movie screen. "I saw your name in the manifest," she said, her voice finally leveling. "Didn't realize you were the Wren Taylor. Not something I bring up over peanuts and ginger ale." Outside the windshield, clouds tore past us like smoke over desert ridge lines. I trimmed the aircraft gently, easing back power on the right engine to keep her from yawing too far. The bird was holding together for now. "How's the rudder pressure?" I asked. "Still mushy on the left side," Cruz said. "Hydraulics are bleeding off." "Then it's on us," I said. "Every turn, every descent, we're hand-flying this girl." In the cabin, I could only imagine what passengers were thinking. Some probably praying, others crying, and more than a few who had made those jokes earlier, dead silent. Because even they knew now, something had gone terribly wrong, and someone had stepped up. I could feel the fear in Cruz's hands as she adjusted throttle with me. She was trained, yes, but she hadn't lived this kind of chaos before. You can't simulate real terror in a flight sim. "You good?" I asked her, softly. She met my eyes and nodded. Yeah, I'm with you. Good, I said. Then let's bring them home. The aircraft started to stabilize. Below us, the ridges and plateaus of Colorado cut shadows across the landscape like knife wounds. It was going to be a single-engine approach, maybe even a dead stick if hydraulics dropped completely. And I was betting everything, my name, my life, and every soul on board, that I still had what it took to land a bird that was falling apart in my hands. We weren't out of the woods. But for the first time since we took off, we weren't falling anymore. We leveled off at 12,000 feet, running on one engine and 30% hydraulics, with a cabin full of people who had no idea just how close they'd come to kissing the Rockies at terminal speed. In the right seat, First Officer Elena Cruz followed my instructions with a steady voice and shaky hands. That was fine. I didn't need perfect. I needed honest. And Cruz, to her credit, was honest about one thing. She was scared. But she stayed with me. Engine 2's temps are holding, she said, scanning the readouts. But hydraulics are still bleeding off the left side. We're not going to have full flaps on approach. Then we land clean and hot, I said, as never leaving the windscreen. I'll handle the touch. You call out speed and altitudes. Her head bobbed in agreement. ATC came back over the radio. Flight 928, you were cleared direct to Peterson Field, runway 17 right. Wind 190 at 12. Surface visibility excellent. Emergency vehicles will be standing by. Roger, I said. Flight 928 turning direct. I dialed the heading in manually. I wasn't touching autopilot. I didn't trust a single system on this plane anymore. Only the yoke, the feel, the subtle tremble of aluminum skin beneath my hands. Do you need me to take over anything? Cruz asked, carefully. I looked at her. She was trying to offer, but she didn't mean it. And I didn't blame her. Sometimes, real leadership isn't stepping forward. It's knowing when to follow someone who's already 2 steps ahead. You ever fly single-engine approach with partial hydraulics in an aging 737? I asked. She cracked a sheepish smile. No. Good, I said. Then we're both learning. In the cabin, word had started to spread. I could see the flight attendants moving quickly through the aisles, tight smiles, practiced calm. The businessman who'd mocked me earlier? He was dead silent now, hands clenched together like he was trying to pray his way into a new personality. I didn't care about apologies. That wasn't why I took the yoke. I didn't want thanks, either. All I wanted was to get 189 strangers back on solid ground. And maybe prove to myself that I wasn't just some ghost riding coach class. That I still had something left in the tank. A few minutes out, ATC patched in a senior FAA emergency ops liaison. I sounded surprised when he heard my voice on the channel. Miss Taylor, just to confirm, you are currently flying the aircraft? Yes, sir, I said. Control and decision authority confirmed by First Officer Cruz. You've got a certified former military pilot flying the bird. We're stable. Copy that. You're cleared all the way down. Emergency crews have visual. I cut the mic and exhaled through my teeth. Cruz leaned back a little. You don't sound nervous. Doesn't help anything if I do. She smiled, almost despite herself. You were really medevac? Kandahar. Bagram. Al-Assad. Mostly pulling guys out of places helicopters weren't supposed to fit. She shook her head in disbelief. And they wouldn't let you touch an airliner. Not unless I wore a different uniform, I said. Funny how credentials matter more than the scars behind them. Not anymore, she said. We hit 6,000 feet. The descent was smooth. Too smooth. You're down, I called. She reached for the control. Nothing. Hydraulics aren't responding. Gear lever's dead. I nodded slowly. Then we'll do it the old way. Emergency extension. I flipped the override, heard the heavy thunk of gravity doing the job that hydraulics wouldn't. 3 greens lit up on the panel, gear down and locked. We were going to land. The hard way. But still, land. Cruz looked out the windshield. Runway in sight. Peterson Field shimmered in the distance. Long clear. Waiting. And for the first time since everything went sideways, I allowed myself to believe. We just might make it. We passed 3,000 feet, gear locked, flaps halfway down thanks to the bleed-off in hydraulics. Elena Cruz was calling out altitudes and airspeeds like she'd done it 100 times, her voice steadier now. Focused. That's the thing about fear, if you channel it right, it sharpens you. If you let it in, really let it in, it can make you dangerous in the best way. And Cruz was sharp now. Wind's still steady from the south, she said. Runway 17 right confirmed. Tower has visual. Copy, I said. Final checklist. She ran it fast. Gear, Flaps, lights, radio, emergency braking. Everything we had left. It wasn't much. Speed's high, Cruz said. We're coming in hot. No choice, I replied. Full flaps aren't happening. No spoilers. This bird's coming down fast and long. I glanced at the altimeter, 1,200 feet and dropping. Out ahead, the runway gleamed in the sun like a promise. Back in the cabin, I could hear silence. That eerie kind. No chatter. No movement. Just quiet. Everyone felt it now. That moment when fate shifts into the hands of someone you barely looked at an hour ago. And me? I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was watching the VASI lights, too white, too red. Perfect glide slope. The kind of thing I used to judge in my sleep. I adjusted trim with what little was left in the system and whispered to the aircraft like it was a wounded animal. Come on, girl. Just a little longer. Elena glanced sideways. Do you always talk to planes? Only the ones I trust. The ground came up fast. 500 feet. The wind nudged the nose left, but I corrected with pressure on the yoke, guiding the aircraft through the flare manually. 300 feet. A little nose up. Power to idle. 200. Hold it, I whispered. 100. The runway filled the windshield. I leveled off. 50 feet. We floated, just long enough to lose some speed. Then, thud. The main gear touched down. Hard, but true. The nose came down slower. No bounce. No tilt. The kind of landing no simulator could teach. I hit reverse thrust on the one working engine, tapped brakes gently with the working side of the system. Elena monitored pressure gauges. Brakes are uneven but responding. Good, I muttered, easing the yoke as the aircraft slowed. We rolled long almost to the far end of the runway, but we stayed on center line. No blowouts. No skids. No fire. Just a slowly decelerating silence, followed by the distant flash of emergency vehicles racing toward us. The second we stopped, the radios came alive. Flight 928, Peterson Tower. Confirm aircraft stopped and secure. All passengers accounted for? I clicked the mic. Tower, this is Flight 928. Aircraft stopped. All souls on board appear safe. EMS en route. I looked over at Elena. Her head was back against the seat, eyes glassy. You did good, I told her. She swallowed, then nodded. So did you, ma'am. I chuckled softly. Let's not make that a habit. In the cabin, the tension broke. I heard the sound of clapping. Not that forced, awkward kind. The kind that rises from disbelief, relief. Passengers were hugging, crying, calling loved ones. Some just sat there, stunned into silence. The businessman who had mocked me earlier stood up, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe what had just happened. He looked toward the cockpit. I saw him mouth the word, helicopters. Yeah, one helicopter pilot just landed a jetliner. The second we opened the main cabin door, the heat hit me, dry Colorado air, warm with mid-afternoon sun, cutting through the tension that had gripped the fuselage like a vice. Emergency crews moved fast. Fire suppression units flanked the aircraft. Medical teams climbed aboard with stretchers, though thankfully, none were needed. Captain Mathis had regained consciousness just minutes before touchdown. Barely enough to mumble, but they wheeled him out on a gurney anyway. Hard episode, they said. Maybe something worse. We'd find out later. I stood at the top of the jet bridge, watching. Passengers filtered past me. Some avoided eye contact. Others gave me awkward, reverent nods, like they weren't sure if I was a hero or just some bizarre twist of fate wearing cargo boots. Then came the businessman, the one who cracked jokes about Top Gun and helicopters. He looked different now, not just humbled, unmade. He paused in front of me, eyes glassy. I didn't know, he said. You didn't need to, I replied. You just needed to listen. He opened his mouth to say something else, then closed it. Good choice. I stepped down onto the tarmac. My boots touched ground for the first time in what felt like years. That's when the suits arrived. They came fast. FAA investigators, airline execs, airport security. One of them was already flipping through a passenger manifest, finger running down a printout. A woman in a blazer walked up to me with cautious authority. Wren Taylor. That's me. I'm Sarah Lynn, FAA Emergency Ops. We've got a room set up. You'll be debriefed immediately. Elena Cruz caught up to me, looking pale but composed. I'm going too. Lynn hesitated. You're not being questioned, First Officer Cruz. She flew that bird too. I said. She's coming. Lynn nodded, already turning. Then follow me. We walked through a line of quiet airport staff, eyes fixed on us like we were ghosts walking out of a wreck. Some saluted. Others just stared. The debriefing room was cold. Plain metal table. 2 chairs. Water bottles already sweating in the middle. Cruz and I sat. Lynn clicked a recorder. Wren Taylor, 32. Former Army, 60 medevac pilot, 3 combat tours. Currently employed as a civilian consultant for Skypath Aviation. She looked up. That sound about right? I shrugged. If your intel's good, sure. She leaned in, lowering her voice. You shouldn't have been allowed to touch that yoke. No, I agreed. But I did. And you landed a 737 with 1 engine, partial hydraulics, and a compromised cockpit crew, she said. You realize that changes things? Only if someone's willing to admit it. Lynn's eyes flicked toward Cruz. And you allowed a civilian to take command of a commercial flight. Cruz didn't hesitate. I trusted the person who knew what to do. When our captain collapsed, Wren was the only one who kept us out of the ground. There was a pause. Lynn leaned back in her chair and tapped her fingers on the folder. Military record says you logged over 2,000 flight hours. Medals. Rescue ops. Why leave? Last mission went sideways, I said quietly. Bad landing. Couldn't save the last man. After that, I grounded myself. Figured I was more useful pointing at problems than flying through them. She nodded slowly. Well, today, you flew through one. The door opened. A new figure stepped inside. He was older, gray around the temples, dressed in a sharp suit that didn't quite hide his military posture. He walked with confidence, the kind of man who'd once given orders and gotten results. He extended a hand. Colonel Nathan Price. Retired. Now with Department of Homeland Security. I reviewed the ATC logs. I shook his hand. Firm grip. Calloused. A flyer. You've done something today, Miss Taylor, he said. Something unconventional. But very, very right. I didn't say anything. You've made us rethink what qualifies someone to save lives at 35,000 feet, he added. And if you're interested, we could use that kind of thinking. I looked at Cruz, then back at him. What are you offering? He smiled. Let's call it a conversation about legacy systems, non-traditional training, and how people like you don't belong in the back of the plane. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was haunted or shaken, though yeah, there was some of that, but mostly because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, voicemails, alerts, mentions. Somehow, someone had leaked the cockpit audio before I'd even made it back to my hotel. Within hours, my name was everywhere. Passenger lands plane after captain collapses. Former Army helicopter pilot saves 189 lives. Unqualified hero. That last one stung a little, but I'd expected it. The world loves its categories. Civilian, commercial, combat. They don't like it when someone jumps between them like lines don't matter. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at a news segment playing on mute. A still image of me, mid-stride, exiting the jet bridge, wind in my hair, sweat on my neck, filled the screen. Under it, Wren Taylor, unlikely savior. Unlikely. Right. I hadn't even left Colorado Springs when the airline's legal team requested an informal discussion. That's corporate speak for please don't sue us, but also don't talk to the press. I ignored the first few emails. They escalated to phone calls. Eventually, they sent a representative to the hotel. Her name was Jessica. Smooth. Polished. The kind of professional who probably hadn't flown anything rougher than a corporate jet. Miss Taylor, she began, first and foremost, thank you. Your actions prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of life. We are all deeply grateful. I said nothing. Just let her talk. That said, she continued, we hope you understand the complexity of the situation. You were not authorized to enter the cockpit, much less assume control of the aircraft. I raised an eyebrow. You mean when the captain was unconscious and his co-pilot was in a full-blown panic attack? Jessica cleared her throat. We're not here to assign blame. Merely to explore how we might move forward, discreetly. There it was. The real motive. Discreetly, I echoed. Meaning quietly. She gave a tight smile. The company would prefer to avoid precedent. Or liability. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Jessica, I didn't land that plane for your company. I did it because people needed help. Your pilot was down. Your systems failed. And someone had to do something. She held up her hands. Of course. But as we consider how to proceed, we were hoping you might agree not to speak publicly for now. I gave her the kind of look I'd once given a 19-year-old private who tried to start a fire using jet fuel. I didn't ask for attention, I said. But I'm not going to hide just because your PR team can't handle the truth. A helicopter pilot saved your 737. Jessica stood, already pulling a card from her blazer. If you reconsider. I didn't take it. A few hours later, Elena Cruz found me at the airport coffee shop. She looked better. Rested. Still pale, but steadier. She slid into the seat across from me and set down her drink without a word. After a beat, she said, I heard about the company meeting. I nodded. They want to keep it quiet. She took a sip, then smiled faintly. Too late. She handed me her phone. A clip was playing. Her own cell phone footage from the cockpit after landing. Just 30 seconds of the plane rolling to a stop, the tower congratulating us, my voice steady and calm as I confirmed shutdown. She posted it on her own account. It had 4 million views. You went viral, she said. Great, I muttered. Just what I needed. But deep down, a part of me, the part one thought I'd buried with my last deployment, felt something else. Not pride. Not ego. Just recognition. Not for what I'd done, but for what I still was. 2 days after the landing, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. Montgomery. My old CO. Wren, he said, voice like gravel and wind. Saw the news. You made us proud out there. I didn't know what to say. Praise from him wasn't handed out lightly. You ever think about coming back? He asked. Too many ghosts, I said. And too many civilians who still think helicopters are just noisy toys. He chuckled. Funny. Those toys kept a lot of people alive. We didn't talk long. We never did. But before he hung up, he said something that stuck. You didn't just fly that plane, Taylor. You reminded a whole damn industry what competence really looks like. Click. A few days later, I found myself standing in front of a classroom at the Federal Training Academy in Kansas. The airline invited me not as a guest, but as a temporary instructor. Emergency response, civilian military cross-training. Real-world situations that don't fit neat into binders. Cruz was there too. She'd volunteered. I figured, she said, if I'm gonna learn from someone, it should be the one who actually did the impossible. We started calling it the Falcon method. No PowerPoint slides. Just scenarios. Instinct. Pressure. Decision-making under fire. I never told them much about my last mission in uniform. But I told them what mattered. In a crisis, it doesn't matter what wings are on your chest. It matters whether you've got the guts to grab the controls when everyone else freezes. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just remembered what it felt like when no one else moved, and I moved anyway. A month after the incident, I was invited back to Colorado Springs, not for a debrief, but a ceremony. I almost didn't go. Medals never sat well with me. Too many good people got forgotten while the survivors stood under spotlights. But Cruz asked me to be there. Said it mattered. The airline's CEO stood at a podium in a hangar flanked by a grounded 737 and a row of news cameras. He talked about professionalism, safety, quick thinking, never quite saying we were wrong, but skirting close. They gave Cruz a commendation. They gave me nothing official. Just a plaque. A thin rectangle of metal engraved with 5 words. When comm failed, she flew. That meant more than any ribbon. After the ceremony, a group of young pilots approached me. One of them, barely out of flight school, said, "You made me rethink what kind of flyer I want to be." I looked her in the eyes and said, "The kind who pays attention when someone with experience speaks, no matter where they're sitting." Back at the hotel, I found a manila envelope slid under my door. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Request for Civil Aviation Certification Waiver. Pilot, Wren Taylor. Reason, extraordinary proven competence in flight. No signature. Just an official stamp from the FAA and a handwritten note in the corner. It's about time. 6 months later, I found myself back on a plane, but this time, not in the cockpit. Seat 14A. Window. Just a quiet passenger again. Outside, the sky over Nevada stretched open and endless. Somewhere up front, a young captain's voice carried through the cabin, clear and calm. She sounded sharp, confident, trained by people who cared more about what you know than what patch you wore. The industry had changed. Not because of me, but because people saw what was possible when someone stepped up. Cruz was now flying left seat on major domestic routes. She sent me a postcard every month, signed with a winged falcon drawn in ink. "Still flying clean," she wrote. "Still hearing your voice every time something rattles." The Falcon method took off, literally. Not as policy, but his attitude. Simulator sessions started adding real-world chaos, not just tidy failures. They taught young pilots to listen better, watch harder, respect the quiet ones. As for me, I turned down every talk show, every endorsement. I still walked into airports with no makeup, no fanfare, just a carry-on and an eye for trim tabs and unusual sounds. Because the truth is, I didn't need to be remembered. I just needed to know that someone else might be ready next time something went wrong at 35,000 feet. That somewhere in seat 22C, or back in row 9, or tucked against the window near the galley, another flyer might be listening, watching, waiting, not for permission, but for the moment. The moment everything fails and someone needs to fly.